everyone. My name is Haley, and I'm the social worker with Hope for HIE. Thank you for joining us today. Our session today is going to focus on infantile spasms, and we have some parents here who have wonderfully agreed to be on our panel today to share about their personal experience with infantile spasms with their children. This panel is, parent-led and peer support. So we will not be giving any medical advice. Please follow up specifically with your child's medical team and providers. If you're concerned about anything, especially if you're concerned about infantile spasms, please follow up with their pediatrician, their doctor, a local urgent care or ER. And with that said, I will go ahead and let Allison and Danielle give a brief introduction, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi, I'm Allison. I am a peer support mentor with Hope for HIE. I have been for about a year and a half now. My son is Robert. He is 6 years old, and we are located in Massachusetts.
Hi, I am Danielle Smiley, and I'm an HIE parent. Been a part of the community for about 7 years now. My son is Marty, and he is 7 years old, and we are located in Huntsville, Alabama.
If you could share a little bit about the providers who manage your child's infantile spasms.
So for Robert, he's mainly managed by his neurologist, who is also a neonatologist through our local children's hospital. They have mostly managed all of their care, but for some of the, side effect management and things like that, it was managed by his pediatrician.
And Marty, we have had our neurological care and infantile spasms and subsequent diagnoses managed by his neurologist, who is also an epileptologist. She handles all of the care that we need for his neurological needs.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about treatment and, medications that your child has used, and then onset of infantile spasms. So I know that it's typically between 4 and 8 months, but it can vary. So if you guys would just share a little bit about the onset for your child and kind of the beginning of that experience with diagnosis.
So for Rob, he started showing signs of infantile spasms probably around 5-ish months old. We had been dealing with some other neurological episodes as well. So it was kind of going back and forth. Is this infantile spasms? Is this something else? And then after multiple videos were sent to neurology, they finally diagnosed him with infantile spasms, and we started with prednisolone right away, and then we added on Sabril later on down the line, and that seemed to help him. We have also tried other meds now for other neurological needs, but for the infantile spasms, those were his two primary courses of treatment.
For Marty, we actually developed infantile spasms a little bit later. He was actually 14 months when we developed it. And he had begun a few months earlier having some other seizures that we were able to easily control with one nice even killed medication, but then we had some new episodes begin. And in a hospital stay to kind of get those under control, we were hooked up to an EEG, and our first indication of infantile spasms was the brain pattern hypsarrhythmia. I saw that on his EEG. From there, very shortly after, about a week or two, that's when he started having the spasms themselves. And so we had that, and then we're able to get to our current epileptologist, and she was the one that was able to diagnose us. Our journey was a little bit different. We actually were wrongly diagnosed for almost a year at the hospital we were at initially. But when we got to our current hospital, we were able to get the diagnosis we need and begin the treatment. We did 2 medications at once. We did ACTH as well as Sabril or vigabatrin. We doubled up right away and hit him strongly just because of how severe our case was. And the two together did stop the hypsarrhythmia and the infantile spasms.
So the next question would just be if we could share a little bit more about with those medications, kind of how did they get started? Was it in the hospital? Was it at home? And just a little bit about your experience with the treatment.
So we chose to start with the prednisolone for Robert instead of the ACTH. actually because I was heading out of town to my first Mega Mom retreat with Hope for HIE. And so we didn't want to do a hospital stay. It was literally like 2 days before I was supposed to leave. So his neurologist said, let's try with prednisolone first, see if that works. And then if it doesn't, then we can try ACTH at a later date. For him, it worked. And it was definitely a more difficult med, not because ACTH is an injection, prednisolone was a liquid, but more of like, the side effects because it is a steroid. So dealing with, just any of the stuff you have to kind of keep an eye out. So he was followed very closely by his pediatrician while he was on that medication to check for like high blood pressure, any like blood in the stool, like lots of different things that they have to keep an eye on. And then with the vigabatrin, we added it on very short time later. I want to say it was like almost a month later, not even. We added it on. We had a really hard time getting the medication because it has to come from a specialty pharmacy. And fighting with insurance. So we actually had to go to our local children's hospital every couple days to get it from their pharmacy until it was able to be delivered to our house. He stayed on that for probably about 6 months. He was also followed very closely by ophthalmology while on that medication to help manage any side effects. But we, once he came off of it, we had no longstanding issues from any of the medications that we're aware of.
For Marty, we actually, it's interesting because our situation, we went to have our first appointment with our current epileptologist. And it was actually in that appointment that we were like, he took us to an EEG, and she came in and greeted us, "Hi, how are you? I'm Dr. so-and-so, and we need to admit you because he has infantile spasms." So, of course, that's not a diagnosis you want to hear, but with the battle that we had for the year prior, it actually was a relief for me, quite honestly. So we were admitted for our initiation onto medication and treatment. And because he had a severity rare case along with the way we needed to treat, that's why we were admitted. We were in the hospital for about 3 weeks. And in that time, as Allison mentioned, the medication can be difficult to get, both the ACTH and the Sabril or vigabatrin, because of insurance and specialty and training and all of that. So having that time in the hospital actually kind of helped us because during that time we were able to get the hospital supply while they worked on getting us what we needed for when we went home. So it went fairly smoothly for us. Another reason why we had the inpatient stay is because of the ACTH is like, it's not technically a steroid, but it's like one. So the side effects that you can get from a steroid is the same as ACTH. So we had to be followed very closely for that as well. And him being on basically the top level of each dose due to his case was another reason for us being in. So just for us to have like the close monitoring that we needed, get the medication level that he needed, and also give us the time to get the medication for when we were home. Total, we did both medications. The ACTH, we did 3 weeks in the hospital and another 4 or 5 weeks at home. It is an injection, so they did do training, made sure we were comfortable with being able to do that, administer at home. With the Sabril, we were on that for a total of about 4.5, 5 months, and continued that at home. And then we were able to come off of both.
So I know that it's common to have a hospital stay with treatment for infantile spasms, especially in the beginning. So if we could just talk a little about the supports and services and resources that are available. I know each hospital system is going to be a little bit different, but some of the things we want to highlight are just utilizing the child life specialist team, utilizing social work and case management as they're able to help you, with making sure you get everything you need with the insurance, getting the medication. So if y'all could just talk a little bit about who did you work with during the hospital and what was your experience in working with the team?
So as I said, we didn't have a full hospital stay, but we have had plenty in our career of HIE. But we definitely utilize child life quite often for different toys or just activities to do while we're in the room. During the infantile spasms portion specifically, we use more case management through the neurology office. They're the ones who helped us manage to get the meds, arranged for the pharmacy at our children's hospital to, it's literally, I had to go to like the basement pharmacy that they get everything from the floors for to get it. And so she arranged to make sure I could do that and that someone would be there to meet me. They also, did a lot of the calling to insurance and getting the prior authorizations and setting up with the specialty pharmacy. And I spent a lot of time on the phone, I would say, with the social worker and actually she's a social worker and a nurse practitioner through their neurologist office to help us manage everything.
Yes, and our situation is quite similar to Allison's. Although inpatient, it was the same. We had a great team of social workers that were helping us case management to handle all of the ins and outs of getting the medication, getting it set up at the pharmacy, getting us the supplies that we needed to go along with the medication, and everything we need follow up at home. All I had to do was sign paperwork, which was great. And for in the hospital for the comfort for Marty, Child Life was awesome. They were always ready and available to provide anything that would make him feel comfortable, more like he was at home, and be able to calm and focus on healing. So it was a nice and smooth experience. I really appreciate how they took care of us.
Thank you guys for sharing. So the next thing we're going to talk a little bit about is just side effects. I know that there are some common side effects that some kids have with some of these medications, and just coping with that as a parent when you're kind of watching your child kind of start a new medication. So some of the things we were going to talk a little bit about is just how to utilize Hope for HIE and the different kinds of support that we have, such as our Facebook group, website, our YouTube channel, lots of ways to connect and get more information and to talk with other families who may be, experiencing similar things. Obviously, myself, the Hope for HIE social worker, if you have questions or you need any resources, you can also utilize Annie. She's our amazing child life specialist. So if you could just share a little bit about sort of the resources you've utilized through Hope for HIE and how that supported you.
So the one reason I even learned about infantile spasms was through the Hope for HIE Facebook group. I had never heard of it. And then I think it was actually in the New to HIE group, someone had posted that they were dealing with it, and then kind of looked at it and was like, wait, I think this might be what we're dealing with, and kind of mentioned that, I kind of use that as a basis to be like, hey, neurology, like this might be what we're trying to deal with. It was also able to utilize it, to just talk to other families that had been through it, and just kind of be like, oh, hey, we're not alone. Like, yeah, my child might be really angry right now because he's on steroids, but it's going to stop eventually. Like when he comes off of them, this is temporary. I had a lot of parents who just were there for emotional support, just to be like, yeah, it's these side effects can be tough, or these meds can be tough, but it's a short-term thing. It's not a med you're going to have to be on forever. It's going to, you'll get through this. We all have. I definitely have utilized, the Child Life on Call app now. We didn't have it obviously when Rob was little, but we're prepping for an upcoming procedure, so it's been very helpful. So I'm sure there's some things on there that could, especially with dealing with the injections and different medication administrations. I know that she has some great helpful information on that. Yes, I think I obviously Rob's 6 now, so this is 5+ years ago. So I think I mainly just utilized the Facebook group at that point, because that's all we had then.
And for me, probably the biggest, it's a little bit different, but such a great support still. For me, being a part of the Hope for HIE community actually helped me to understand HIE more itself and the different things that can come along with it, the effects of the damage to the brain and what it could possibly lead to. So for me, it was when we did develop this, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, what is this? Where did it come from? It was, okay, this is something that could happen, okay, because of this. And it just helped me to, understand, I guess you could say, the process or the possibilities of the outcome of his diagnosis, and be able to kind of get some peace from that. And then help me to stay, get focused and know how to move forward with advocating for his care with his neurology teams, switching hospitals, all the things that we had to do. So for me, Hope for HIE, excuse me, has been a great foundation for all of the care that I've needed to advocate for him since our diagnosis. Mm-hmm.
Thank you both for sharing. So the last little part we want to go over a little bit is just emotions and coping and kind of how to navigate this process, because as y'all have shared, there's a lot of parts, there's a lot of things going on. A lot of times you're in the hospital as well during part of it. So We have a lot of parents who share a lot of things in our Facebook group, and just to kind of share a little more about, parental guilt, the frustrations with medical team and treatment options, feelings of helplessness, the fear of the unknown, and kind of how you're going to navigate this diagnosis and the process. So if you could just share a little bit about how you made it through that process and what was helpful to you, that would be great.
So I think for me, it was a lot of information very quickly because obviously, as most of us, the HIE injury happens at birth, and then this is, 4 to 6 to 14 months later. So it's still, pretty fresh right after you're learning the HIE world and learning what your life looks like now. And then all of a sudden it's this next big thing on top of everything else. So I think that was probably the hardest part for me. As I said, leading on the HIE group and other parents was really helpful to like kind of be like, we've been through this. You'll get through this too. It's and kind of how Danielle had said, it kind of helps me like with those building blocks of what to expect next. All right, so these are the meds. This is what possible side effects could be. It was definitely hard. But I think the one thing I kept telling myself was this is a short-term thing. The, treatment for these meds they're not going to be for the rest of his life for most kids, especially for, this specific thing. And I want to say it was just a lot of like leaning into people who have done it before and asking, we're seeing this side effect, or, my pediatrician, they were on call. I'm pretty sure I became best friends with the nurse practitioner during those months because I'd be like, he's most people have seen it with steroids, can be a lot of like sleeplessness or irritation and like kids get very upset from steroids, as we all do. If you've ever been on some steroids yourself, it can make you jittery, it can make you anxious. So it's calling them, being like, I can't get him to calm down. Like, all right, bring him in. Let's double check everything. Let's make sure the blood pressure is not high. Let's double check that. Let's eliminate any of your worries so we can figure out, all right, it's just the medication. So just building that network of people that you can call or talk to while you're going through this crazy time that it just is happening on top of everything else. It's a lot, but utilizing hope, utilizing your support network, whether it be virtual or in person, was really the most important thing for me.
And for me, with our journey being seemed kind of quite different than other children, where we were older when we developed it, and then we were wrongly diagnosed for a year. Admittedly, it was very hard because there was a lot of loneliness and feeling isolated because the medical team that we were with before we got to our current hospital, obviously was not on our side, so to speak. Because they just were not believing that this is what we had. So there was a lot of kind of feeling like I was fighting for it alone. Also, along with that, knowing that I had suspected it the entire time and still had to walk out that almost year of not being able to get him the treatment he needed. Naturally, there were feelings of guilt that tried to come along. But my mother has actually been by my side. My son I fostered him and then adopted him, and she's been by my side the entire time. So really, we have been each other's like main support during our journey with Marty. And I just really took that time to kind of lean into her and just kind of, we really leaned into each other and just kind of expressed our feelings and concerns. And she helped me to not fall into that guilt and not feel responsible, because I was doing all that I could and trying to lean into the medical team and point out things and repeatedly contact. And so just advocating as best that I could, regardless of what they were telling me, is what really helped me to kind of stave those guilty feelings and feeling like I wasn't doing enough. And then having that support person, my mother, with me, and then also just the general care of HIE, dealing with it and the effects of that. Having the community Hope for HIE was great to just kind of see that there is a gamut of things that people are dealing with, and that there are journeys that are harder than others, and what are people doing to process and cope. And so for me, I've done a lot of kind of reading what other people have kind of walk through and express how they're processing, and the support that people are receiving in comments. And so that's actually helped me. So in some ways, I've been a little bit like a sidelines kind of support receiver, but it has been helpful because it does give peace and comfort in knowing that you aren't alone, even if your story isn't the same as anyone else's. We're still in this community of we're working hard to work through this very hard diagnosis and take care of our children as best that we can.
Thank you. Is there any kind of last thoughts or maybe things that we haven't talked about so far today that you feel like would be helpful for other families that are, concerned about infantile spasms or beginning to learn about it?
I would say just, trust your gut kind of. And like, if you think something's going on, video it, send it over your medical team. If they're not listening, like Danielle said, find a new medical team. If I go somewhere else, it's, your kiddo and if something isn't in their norm.
Yes, and I would say exactly what Allison said, and I would include, because another part of our story is that Marty's spasms did not look like the typical spasms. So that was another reason why the previous medical team was, I guess, able to lean into that's not what we had. But I just knew I had seen the rhythm, and then what he was doing was a spasm. It just didn't look exactly like the other one. So even if it doesn't look like what everyone is telling you it should look like, that doesn't mean that that's not what's going on. So like Allison said, trust your gut, record everything, and keep pushing until you find someone that will listen to you, because you will find that person. You just got to keep pushing.
Thank you both so much for coming today and for just sharing your experience on infantile spasms. I know that this will help so many families in our community. So with that, I'm going to end the recorded session and then we'll go into our traditional group after that.